Well, good morning. Welcome back. We're going to continue working on that Allis WD today. Kind of had a couple of questions that I reached out to the some of the Facebook guys on about oils and what have you. Between my hydraulic reservoir and where the clutch pack is a seal, and so I was trying to figure out, do I replace the seal or not? The seal is questionable. It looks to be okay, but there's a little spot in it towards the top that's not even in the oil, except when it's being mushed around there. That's even going to be affected. So basically, through that information, I've determined that what we're going to do is just use the same oil in both cavities, and so that way, if there is a little leakage between the two, it's not going to be that big of a deal. It's the same oil, so we won't have to worry about having the wrong weight oil in each cavity. So let me flip around here, and we'll show you exactly what the plan is for today related to that item. Okay, so here we are. Here's the side where the hydraulic pump goes in, and the seal that I was referring to is right up in there on the front of that shaft, and probably not enough light to see it that well, but there's a spot up in there, like I mentioned earlier, that was a little questionable, but we've determined that we're not going to mess with that, and I thought that was going to be kind of the end of my thought on even separating this thing. So it's right up here on the top. Kind of see the spring on the bottom side of that seal. I'm trying to get a good angle here. But anyway, with that said, I got to looking, and there's basically two, maybe three components that I need to remove in order to take out that torque housing. The reason I'm wanting to take it out now, even though I'm not going to replace the seal that's in here, is I've got a gasket between this cavity, and I got a gasket back here at the transmission and hand clutch. The hand clutch looks to be fine. It is pretty rusty in there. I'd kind of like to, clean that thing up good. So I think what we're going to do is go ahead and separate that torque housing and the bell housing section away from the back. That's going to let me pull the hand clutch out, get that thing cleaned up. That's going to let me clean up my reservoir. My PTO is also getting resealed, so I'll be able to take this whole piece and just lay it on a set of sawhorses and turn it over. That's going to allow me to really get that thing put together the way I need to put it together and keep it sealed up. So with that said, the only remaining items that have to be removed is my rod for my clutch, hand clutch, and then I've got my rod up here for the foot clutch. It's actually connected. It looks like it's connected to the same cavity, but if we look at it over here, actually it is, yeah, so that runs through. Technically I wouldn't have to pull that off, but I'm going to separate here anyway, so we'll just pull the whole thing loose. It may not have to go right in the beginning. And then lastly will be the PTO shaft. And then at that point, everything else that's connected up and crosses over those 2 points has been removed. So that raises the question now, how am I going to crib this thing up? How am I going to keep it secured? Because we got basically the back left of this thing off, waiting on my bearings for my rear end. So I think what I'm going to do first, my crane back there is available. I don't have it in use at the moment, so I'm going to slide it up here. We'll wrap up the front end. I've got 5 bolts to remove. We'll go ahead and pull the 4 off right here. And then I've got one on the bottom side of my engine mount right there that I just put in temporarily so I could roll this thing out to power wash it last time. And we'll block up the this section here. Block it right up underneath that bell housing, just enough to hold it in place. We'll use the crane. We'll lift that front end out of there. We'll get it moved out of the way. I'll leave my blocking on the front, and I'll go ahead and remove this side frame rail. The only bolts left on that, I've got 6. I've got the 2 in the, actually looks like there's 4. 2 there and 2 here that's still part of that bell housing section. And then the 2 larger bolts that made up to the rear half. Once those things are disconnected, then I can pry the frame rail out, and then basically the only thing we got set in there is the torque tube up to the front of the bell housing. There'll be nothing else connected. At that point, I'll have access to my clutch pedal and the rod. We'll pop it off of there. There's a brake lever piece right here and a brake pin that goes to the back half that I've got to take off that I failed to mention earlier. Forgot that transferred over. I got to have it out anyway because I got to get into that back brake. So we'll loosen that up, get it out of there, and then directly underneath the hitch, right up on the front here, I will probably put some 6x6s blocked up there to go across that. And then we'll wrap up this front whole section right here with the crane, and then I'll unbolt it. Then we should just be able to slide that thing out. Now to separate these 2 halves, I've got my throw-out bearing and clutch mechanism in there that I've got to maybe do something with. I need to find out, there's that little plate there in the back that's got a bolt on this side and the other side. I got to make sure what I need to do with that, because I'll have to pull that section this way and leave that shaft that runs through right here, leave that shaft in. So yeah, we'll figure that out once we have that up. I can have that on the bench. When I separate the hand clutch, at that point we'll just be able to be slid right off that shaft and come out of there. You can see the splines in there, right there in the center. And then you can see down in there, back down in there too, that's all your PTO gearing getting down to that. It really doesn't look too awfully bad in there. I'd cleaned it out some, but this back section is pretty nasty. So that's kind of the plan. We'll flip over to the time-lapse camera and watch all that go pretty quickly. I don't know, it may take me a couple of hours or so to do that. At some point, I've got to get this other wheel off. And so I'm just thinking about stability here as I'm taking pieces loose. You know, when do I go ahead and pull that wheel off? The wheel, there's no fluid in it. But right now it offers good stability for kind of that back half, because it just makes it a wider stance while I'm kind of pulling around this other stuff. So at some point, I'll once I get that front section off, if I don't remove the tire, I'll just go ahead and put my crane on that back half for extra support, and we'll get it locked in there. Then I'll zip that wheel off. Then I can get the fender and then the other axle out. A little bit of work I've got to do yet on the back side. After all this takes place, the lift arms are in the way of the rear end. I've got 2 new bearings and seals coming, like I mentioned, for both sides, left and the right. And there's a lot of crud down in here, and I'm going to have those carrier bearing, the carrier bearing or retainer bearing housings out anyway. And so why not just drop that rear end out of there? That's going to open up that whole space. I can clean it good. I've spun the rear end around multiple times and watched it using the PTO. Everything looks fine with it, but as I roll it out, I can stick it up on the bench and I can really lay some good eyes on it. And then that basically is going to prove that my entire drivetrain is good shape. So I won't have to worry about getting this new engine put in here and then having to drivetrain problem. We'll have it completely, I say completely gone through. We'll have it separated. I'm not putting new bearings and gears and all that in there, but we'll have it everything separated, inspected, and checked out good. Now, one thing to note, if you're taking the torque tube and separating it, the step one on the instructions in the manual is to put your hand lever in the engaged position. So make sure that your clutch pack is closed up. And so I've already done that. And that's just going to keep all that together whenever we go to pull this apart. Not 100% sure why they have you do that, but I'll find out later what the importance of that is. But that's step number one on the removal. So anything, with that said, we're going to get started. I know it's kind of been a long intro here. We'll get the time-lapse footage here, and we'll speed it up where the next couple of hours will go by in seconds, and then you can see what the end result is. All right, so you've been watching the past couple of minutes there on the time lapse. I've got the side rail, got the front end off, side rail off, undone the clutch lever. I'm inside the bell housing now. I have removed the throwout bearing assembly. I've pulled the bolt out of the bottom of the fork and laid it down. And the next piece in there is the, I think it's the shift collar, which is that piece I pulled the two 9/16 bolts out of. So we're gonna pull that back. I want to show you what I found here. All right, so it's actually the shift bracket. I just ran over there and checked the manual real quick. So the shift bracket, I pulled out the two bolts holding it in. We'll slide this thing off of the input shaft, and on the bottom side of this, there is oil. Which means that seal right there needs to be replaced. No big deal, I'm splitting this thing out anyway, but that it was a good find, really. The inside of this bell housing, as you can see, was pretty nasty. I power washed it out. I mean, there's some stuff obviously I didn't get, but I'm going to put a new seal that in there that will eliminate having all that junk sloshing around in here in my clutch and on the flywheel and all that. So I just want to point that out. That's the shifter bracket, and your throwout bearing slides right on that with your shifting fork in place like this, and just pushes out. Or the spring down here on the bottom, you can see it in the back, that attaches to the bottom of the throwout bearing shifter piece. So anyway, that's where we're at now. We're gonna continue stripping down. I've got that basically opened up now where that shaft will go on through. It would have slid out of this anyway, but I wanted to check the seal out and pull all that off. I didn't want to accidentally get that thing all done back together and not have that off and see that seal. So we've got that figured out at this point. All right, continue stripping down. All right, guys, so I got my 6 bolts out of the connection between the torque tube and the front bell housing section. And I've got my crane connected through the starter housing. I just kind of looped it through there to make sure that thing didn't roll out of my strap. So that'll keep me with positive control there. And now it's just ready to kind of disconnect it. So like I said, this is the first time I've ever had one of these part right here. So we'll go ahead and do that. And really, probably one of the easiest things I've done yet. I'm gonna lift up just a smidgen. Okay, so I got more weight to the back here. So we'll slide it off of that. basically that's it. I mean, nothing to it. There's that front mating surface. Now this gear right here is the one that will drive the belt pulley, and you can see somebody has tried to push that thing in there at some point with it spinning. I just tore the heck out of that. We're not going to do anything with it. I don't even know if the thing's pressed on there or what. I mean, if you put it on there right, the belt pulley's going to run fine. There's enough teeth. Looks like there's 2, then 1, then there's a bunch of them in place, and 2, 1, 2, 1. So I'm not too concerned about that. I am going to check for up and down right now, so kind of lifting up on that shaft just to see. And it's nice and tight, so my bearing right there is good. There's a couple of weep holes that's it's actually new to the WD series. The late WDs you get are going to have that hole in there. They actually address in the service manual that you need to drill that thing out if it doesn't have it, so that'd be an early series WD. And then this hole here, it's just in the gasket. It does not go anywhere. We look over here on this other mating surface. So there's that other hole I was talking about, so that just lets that run through. There's a hole that is in there that doesn't go anywhere. There's no hole in the gasket. Kind of figured there'd be some kind of pin, dowel pin or something, but there's not. No dowel pins on that. And then of course that is the seal that I talked about earlier. I'll spin this thing around here. I can look right up in the front. That seal right there I'm going to replace. So I had a bunch of oil down in there. So we'll get that squared away as well. Well, we got it stripped down. All right, so that's that first section. Put a new gasket on that mating surface. You can kind of see I'm getting down to not much to hold up that rear end. I went ahead and blocked up that rear tire because I wanted to move just a little bit, so I didn't want anything to happen there. So I've got it blocked up. I think our next step, just looking at the positioning of everything, I think what we're going to do is go ahead and pull the other tire off, the fender. Maybe go ahead, I'm trying to think here. I just don't want to get myself in a situation where I got a bunch of weight up off the floor a good ways. So, I don't know, I may do that, may not. Let me kind of look at it, and then we'll figure it out. Back to the time lapse. Okay, so we have pretty much everything stripped down and ready to pull off the torque tube. I've got it secured up with my lift, and it's already broke loose. I've got all of the bolts out of either side, which is a total of 6, 3 on each side. So now I'm just going to slide it out. I should have enough room. Well, my crane will slide back anyway. But I do see that looks like my strap right down here could stand to be moved up. So I'm going to drop that down and get that in better position first. It was just kind of right on the edge of that. Yeah, there we go. It's on the edge of the PTO drive coming out, so I don't want to slide off of there like we did earlier. Alright, now I just got this little strap on here, and it's just to help equalize the load. I didn't have a real good center point, and that's all it's for. There's not a whole lot of weight there. Most of the weight sitting on that is just to keep the load equal. So we got everything disconnected. I will note that 2 of the bolts on that back half were facing forward and the other 2 on the back side. So, all right, let's just see if we can get this thing apart here. All right, so it's splitting, as you can see. Now down inside here, it's kind of what I was curious on. I'm gonna get my camera back in better position here. All right, so there's a shaft right here that's sliding inside, so it should stay. It looks like it is sliding out, so. Just kind of moving it back and forth here. Feels like I got some weight. I'm gonna lift up with my crane here. Okay. There we go. There it is. Okay. So there's that. Reminds me a lot of how the 100 series go into that power director clutch. So there's the other half of it. All right, so there it is with the torque tube separated. This will be your input shaft, and if it's like those 100 series, there's 2 separate shafts right there. This more than likely will just pull out. So you want to be careful of that. You're pulling apart. I need to check on that. That would be the input shaft going into the tranny. But anyway, there's the torque tube out. I'll lift it up and haul it over there with the bell housing portion. And I may set it right here on the edge, more than likely. I may grab another set of sawhorses, but I can set it right on the edge here. And that way I'll have access to everything. Be able to work it waist height and bending over the whole time. All right, so at this point we're just going to go ahead and pull the brakes out of that left side, and we'll go ahead and get that other axle out of the way. The same process for this side is what we use on the other side that you've already seen. So just getting the area kind of cleaned up, and the weight was just a little bit shifted to that side because the axle's still in, so I fought that for just a little bit and finally got that axle pulled and out of the way. And then you have the rat's nest that's left in there to clean up. So anyway, appreciate you watching. That will conclude the video on separating the torque tube and bell housing and getting that other axle out of the way and getting all of those components ready for a rebuild. So make sure you hit like, subscribe, turn the notification bell on, and you'll see the assembly of each of these units go back together while I'm working on this Allis Chalmers WD. Thanks for watching and have a good day.